Hey, great to see you. Happy New Year, bro.
Yeah, you too. You too. So many amazing things coming. I'm so excited for all this.
I'm so excited for you because you've put your time in and you've gone through the trenches of being an artist. And we're just thrilled that we get to work with you and let you kind of continue to inspire. And thank you so much for your patience putting this thing together. I just want to kind of dialogue with you a little bit here because I respect artists in so many ways. And with something as abstract as something as conceptual as this breath,
Mm.
I wondered, how do you start? Where do you get your ideas from? Or what was it for you that allowed you to put the pen or the pencil to the paper and start doodling and creating?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for all of that you said about, the creative process. And it's still such a massive mystery to me, but it's a beautiful mystery to step into that process and then to create something. And as you're saying, like, how does one communicate breath, something that's invisible in physical form? And well, you have to turn it into physical, visible form. And so that's by use of particular tools or particular techniques or certain brushes, whether you're doing traditional pencil, paper, or digital. And as you know, I do both. It's hard to explain this stuff. Sometimes it's just easier just to jump in and do it. That would be a cool thing for like to do a live thing with you, like creating live. Like, I mean, if you wanted to do that right now, I would totally do that.
well,
But
look- well, I love that.
yeah,
And it's an abstraction or something that's conceptual, right? I think one of the bridges that takes the abstraction from a philosophical kind of theoretical standpoint is the experience. And I know that when I talk to my team that Inspire 2 is different than Inspire 1. And I know that you got into the breath. I know you got into doing it. And was that any help for you in kind of deciding, what was the next step or the step for V2 that could be unique or different than V1 that you could translate in some way? And I think the piece is really a masterpiece, and it's a fun conversation to have.
yeah. And as far as, I look at comparing V1 to V2, and I see a year in my life, and I see the upgrade, and I see the challenges, and I see the wild, tumultuous year, and I see it in the image, and I think it came out beautiful. I mean, and that's kind of my litmus test for my work, and it gets harder and harder every time. Every new piece I make has to kind of make me gasp when I see it. And that's kind of my test. It has to make me feel something so that when I release it, I know it's going to make others feel something. So
I
it's,
love that.
yeah, I'm always
I
hard on myself to like upgrade and the next piece has to be better than the last. So I look at V1 and I'm like, oh, that's like, oh, that's cute in an interesting way. I think it's great. But then now this new one is just like, boom, this one really hits you. And the last minute changes that we all did to kind of really convert it from essentially a different color universe into this back and tying it to V1, it just worked out beautifully. And I'm so glad it is what it is right now. So,
cool. I have to tell you, I love it. So let's just do this just for people that can see the image, the final image. There's so many iterations that we went through and, so many different possibilities that you presented to us. And in the early stages, we were kind of like, oh, I like that one. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, oh, that might be too much, and then we put a lot in, the one when we got to the close to the end and we had so many things. I think that I love the snake like movement of energy that moves, from the bottom of the piece to the top of the piece, and it's etheric and it's energetic, and I love that there are those energy centers that seem to be lit up as the energy moves up. I don't know if people see it, but there are, you do this so well. You have those little crystals,
yes,
the rhombohedron
I
crystals
guess.
embedded in the piece. Like, I think ancient wisdom, ancient mystery. They were always cloaking and hiding information in a symbolic form that was available to the initiate who was on the journey. They could see the hidden meaning, behind some of those things. So I respect and love the fact that you slipped them in there. And then all the unique faces, that just represent so many ideas that were not this just, character living a linear life. We're really dimensional in there. We wear many faces, and we have worn many costumes to the masquerade. We've been all kinds of different, simultaneously, different individuals on the journey. And so why don't you just describe the piece for someone who really wants to look and feel and get into it and understand the meaning behind it?
And I love the way that you just described it, because it was, the different faces and the different masks or personalities or emotions, right? Trying to convey this central figure with surrounding personalities or emotions. And I didn't want to go into every emotion on every face. It was all about the power of the breath work and getting into that heightened state of bliss and centeredness and euphoria. But also there's an intensity to it. And it was all about, how do I make each individual face having their own intense, mystical experience. And it's tricky because, there's only so many ways the eyebrows can go on each one. And if you look at each different face on the piece, they are having their intense experience. And again, are all the faces that connected to the main person? I mean, there's a mystery to it. They're not necessarily all the same character, and it became very elusive and like, okay, is this all the same person in different states, or are these different people? But they're definitely all feminine-esque characters having their experience. And then it got to this point of like, it got way overcomplicated. As you know, the colors were everywhere. I was using every color in the visible spectrum, and I wanted to be different. And then ultimately became like, no, let's tie it back to the first through the color scheme, but then amplify it with textures and fractals and sacred geometry and all this wild stuff. And yeah, it definitely got out of hand for a little while. For me as an artist, I'm like, I lost the painting, as it were. The term I've used a lot. I've lost it. Oh my God, I lost it. I got to step away. So,
no, it's great though. It's great though, because I mean, how many concepts can you convey in one piece to the point where it's like, oh my God, there's a lot going on here. But in the present piece, I love that each face has that center in their brain illuminated, because that's the only way you can experience dimensions, right? So every single individual in that piece is really having a very similar bottom, fourth of the piece or so. That really is the reservoir of energy that's, that we're using, to move to the brain. And it's kind of cool. I hope that we can show where when we got to that final version, we had once again those eyes, right? And and we had the wings behind all of this. It was almost so big that it was scary. Like, is that a reptile looking through those eyes, because it had scales on their eyes? And I was like, whoa, like that's almost scary to.
Yeah, it did. And after you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And actually what look like scales, those are pine cone textures, right? And the similarity of the pine cone texture to scales, right? And then how that's the serpent and all that. Like, but then after you mentioned that, I'm like, then I saw it. I'm like, oh yeah, he's right. It doesn't seem a little creepy.
It wasn't creepy. It was just the fact that, you ever look at, like, I'll use a simple example, like Mona Lisa, no matter where you move in the Louvre, she's looking at you. There's never a moment where those eyes are off you. It's kind of like that, it was just, it was big. And of course the pine cone geometry, the point I'm making is that every single stroke, every single thing that you have in there, from the fractals to the crystals, to the energy centers, to the light, it's all intentional. And I love that it's embedded in the piece, because anybody who's got the time and the presence to sit with it and to examine it. You know, I think that's what art does for me. I do want to be inspired by art, but really what I want to do is I want to feel differently from experiencing it. I want it to anchor something meaningful in me that reminds me of my journey, reminds me of what this mystery called life is, reminds me that where I currently am is not the end. It's just where I am in the present moment. And the breath is really just something that we use to allow the body to relax enough during the meditation, but have enough energy in the brain that you don't fall asleep, you know, relaxed and awake. You know, that's kind of the game, right? So I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. I appreciate that you're part of this with us. And I always want to acknowledge the creative process, and God bless you. What a wonderful job you did here.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. It's such an honor to be working on this with you. And yeah, I'm blown away by just all of it. And people are going to love this. It's going to really change a lot of people's lives. Like, I know it. It's changed my life. Your work has changed my life all the way up to this point. And now this new one is going to be, such a huge explosive moment in many people's lives. And I'm so excited to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for your work.